First, I have a cold. My grandkids are here. Well, they're outside at the moment. So I don't feel well. But I want to do a follow-up video to the other video where people said, Jon Stewart didn't slander Apple. And, of course, no, he didn't slander Apple. I was just trying to make the point that he used his interview as an opportunity to do his grudge against Apple for whatever. And he wasn't specific about it. And, we're around the same age, okay? I'm just calling him to account, or I'm calling him out. Make of it what you will, all right? You don't like me, fine. And I don't dislike Jon Stewart. I like Jon Stewart, but again, I'm calling him out. You can do better. You can do a lot better. And so I'm going to go through the video. So I've cut out only his questions to Lina Khan, and I'll explain why I feel that they're very poor, unprepared questions. He could have done a lot better. It's a great opportunity to talk to her, and I feel he just phoned it in. He's probably making a lot of money for this, and it bugged me, okay? So I'll explain why I didn't like each question.
How much pressure do these companies exert on the Federal Trade Commission? In other words, how much do they fight whatever regulation you're trying to put into place to keep them from becoming monopolies or from these types of business practices?
See, I don't even know how to approach that question. He's saying, how much they fight against the regulation. Now, the FTC makes regulations based on congressional laws, okay? The FTC doesn't make up the law. It does some interpretation of the law, but it doesn't make up the law. So anything that the FTC wants to go after a company from has to be on the basis of law. So to ask her, how much are they pushing back against regulations, they can't push back. If the FTC does a regulation and a company doesn't follow it, well, they're going to get fined, or they're going to be put out of business or something. I mean, that's the way it works. And if the company really doesn't like it, they can take the FTC to court and say your regulations are actually not part of congressional intent. So this is a very basic indication to me that Jon Stewart doesn't understand how our legal system works, how the FTC works. So to me, it's a dumb question on that level. It's also a dumb question because, what you're going to say, oh, yeah, they push back a lot. There are people following me in my car. They never do a thing that we say they do. Anyway, it's just but okay. It's the first or second question. I'll let it pass. Let's go on to the next question.
What are the companies? So these are separate things. Monopolies, the way I always viewed it was, that's only one company. But don't we have oligopolies in this country? Aren't there industries? Consolidation has made it. For instance, the entertainment industry is controlled by 6 companies. Is that considered not a monopoly, but a problem? What are the companies?
Well, of course. Yes, oligopolies are a problem. Monopolies are a problem. In any case where, and she talks about this, where a company does something that prevents a consumer from having a freedom of choice or prevents a small business from competing fairly is a problem, whether it's an oligopoly or whatever he said. Anyway, so again, I just felt that this was sort of a very generalist question that isn't the time I would have used. So.
And what would be the metrics of that? How would you judge that? Because I know you've sued Amazon.
That's right.
And that's for those practices.
So that's a good question. What are the metrics that you go by to determine if a company is abusing its power or is becoming a monopoly? It's a very good question, but he never really follows up on it. But anyway, moving on. I don't want you to think I'm saying every question is bad.
Is there anything in the company's leader that also suggests that? For instance, if you were to go from being sort of a nerdy dude who sold books out of a garage into, let's say, a jacked Lex Luthor type, does that also suggest either monopolistic practices or some type of injections?
So he's making a joke of this. So I don't know. I guess okay, you're making a joke. But the fact is, Jeff Bezos did not just start in a garage selling books. He worked for a very powerful investment firm with very wealthy clients. He was somewhat of a prodigy, a financial prodigy, and he had a lot of money behind him. So even though he's working in the garage, make no mistake about it, he had real money behind him. Just like Bill Gates' mom was best friends with IBM's CEO, so she could get her son like a one-on-one meeting. So anyway, to me he's whitewashing that, making a joke about it. I don't know, whatever. I'll let it pass again, but a missed opportunity because I didn't think it was that funny. Because again, Jeff Bezos isn't even the head of Amazon anymore.
How many lawyers do you, like, for instance, so what are you up against? So you've got government lawyers. I'm assuming you've got a pretty good cadre of them, but like, let's say you're going after Amazon. How many lawyers do they have?
A silly question. It's not really how many lawyers you have. I mean, the FTC they can make regulations. They have the power to put these companies out of business. They have the power to fine them like no tomorrow. Now, of course, they have to go through the courts to a certain extent, but really they have a lot of power. So how many lawyers that you have, like, you're sort of like making your own argument. Like, the problem with the monopolies is the FTC doesn't have enough lawyers. And to Lina's credit, she doesn't say, "Yeah, you're right. They're overtaking us." She never says that. She says we have advantages, and so no, it's one-on-one, and we can deal with him. He doesn't really. I'll get into this later.
Just looking at lawyers, they outnumber you 10-1.
Sometimes they can. Yeah, I mean.
Not just getting a fine. This isn't about going after Amazon and saying so. Because this is what the SEC does. The SEC, I think, is overmatched as a government agency. And you don't have to comment on that, but just nod your head. Utterly overmatched. So they go after groups, and then they can't really prove it in court. So then they're like, how about this? You give us a cut of your profit, and we'll all be done here. How do you handle that with Amazon? It's not just about a fine.
All right. Let's talk about the SEC for a second. Now, believe it or not, back in the day, I was one of the first SEC-mandated chief compliance officers for a mutual fund. So the SEC put in a new rule that said every mutual fund had to have a chief compliance officer, and I was one of them for a while for one of the companies. So I just like to say I know a little bit about the SEC. Now, in my opinion, he's completely wrong about the SEC. The SEC is not understaffed or undermanned or underfunded. Actually, they get their funding from all the companies. So when a company files a prospectus or whatever, they pay a small fee that goes to the SEC to pay for it. And that's how they're funded. So they're funded by the businesses. The problem with why the SEC doesn't get very far, if it's supposed to get far, is that half the people that work at the SEC are lifers, right? They're just there to do the job. They don't have any political opinion about whether this company should be gone after or that company. There are a lot of handicapped people at the SEC, like not handicapped, but they try and employ people that would have trouble finding work elsewhere, not because they're not capable. I don't want you to think I'm saying that at all. I think it's great that the SEC and many government agencies, they're not like a big employer that would be like, I don't feel like dealing with this person in a wheelchair, right? They'll hire them, and they're good people, very good people. But still, half the SEC are lifers, just like any other government agency. The other half are just there to get the SEC on their resume. And when they get the SEC on their resume, then they can go, they go and they get jobs at JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, whatever, all these big companies. So it's just for an ambitious person, it's just a thing to get on your resume. So do you think that they would really attack these companies that they're going to go work for? No. That's the problem with the SEC. It's corrupt. Now, if they had laws that said that if you worked at the SEC, you could not take a job at a company in the same industry until 4 years later or something like that, or your salary couldn't be at this X amount, that might sort of fix the problem. But that's the problem with the SEC. It isn't that they're outgunned. So again, to me, it shows Jon Stewart's tremendous ignorance of just the basics of how some of these regulators work. And if you disagree, just put in the comments. You tell me whether you think what I said was wrong, if you have any experience with the SEC. All right, moving on.
And he went to jail. Do you have to refer things to the DOJ, or do you have an enforcement arm?
So
I imagine that the practice that he did in the pharmaceutical industry, which was taking a life-saving drug and like jacking the price up by I don't know how many thousands of percent. I mean, he did something crazy, right? How do you keep that as a normal practice in the pharmaceutical industry? I mean, are they colluding as a group to keep prices high? Why are we having so much trouble with them and prescription drug prices?
I mean, look.
No, they're not colluding. Far from it. It's really a problem with the insurance companies, with how insurance companies can set. This is a complex. I'm not even going to touch this subject, but no, it is not colluding. So why are you asking a throwaway question that just, just ask an expert first. Hey, John Stewart, again, he has the wealth and he has the influence. He can call anybody on the phone and say, listen, me and Lina Khan. I think the biotechs are in collusion, or the health, whatever, pharma industry. I'm going to ask her about that. What do you think? And that person will say, well, maybe they would say that's an important question. And this is the problem with a lot of his questions. There are no specifics. Like, give a specific. Like, yes, there's that one drug, Schipul or whatever, but that was a very small company. He gamed the system. He's not really part of big pharma. And this is a problem, by the way. They're throwing him in jail. It's like you're throwing some little pipsqueak in jail who got this small little drug and took advantage, and you're not dealing with the big problem, the big pharma.
Is their game so you being entrepreneurial, is their game, we're going to see how far we can push this and get away with it and do these different things in the hopes that we don't run up against an entrepreneurial or crafty FTC? Are they waiting you out?
Yeah, I mean, all companies wait out all regulators. They all do. It's better to ask forgiveness than permission. So yes, but so again, it's a stupid question. It doesn't get anywhere. It's yes, they will wait you out if they can. So I don't know. I mean, I can answer that one.
Talk about the tech companies, because they are the new oligarchs. It would seem they are the companies that. And you see this especially in Europe, where they are fined considerable amounts of money for monopolistic practices, or Apple just had to pay an enormous fine. Microsoft has always been found guilty of certain monopolistic practices when it comes along. How do you handle enforcement for these new, incredibly consolidated and enormous oligarchies?
Well, the simple answer is they're not any different than any other business. And by the way, she answered all these questions very well, I thought. I wish she wouldn't begin every answer with, look, you see. You got to stop with that look thing. But other than that, I mean, they're no different than other companies. And when he brings up the Europe thing, again, he doesn't bring up a specific thing. Most of the stuff with Europe is actually about data privacy. It's not about being a monopoly. So anyway, again, specifics, he's just like, and this is what I don't like about the new Jon Stewart. It's all like, you're evil, the problem is you're evil, the problem is you're evil. Like, it's just all sort of like that. And then the audience is like, oh, we love you, Jon Stewart, for pointing out that they're all evil. Well, yeah, they're evil, I agree. Apple's evil. I'm not a fan of Apple. Like, I said Apple. But, what does it get me for saying that you're evil? I mean, does it do anything? So, that's sort of what I'm annoyed about. Anyway, okay, let's move on.
What is the one against Facebook? Why is that considered monopoly? Wouldn't they say, well, that's a sign of our success. We're so successful, we have extra money, and with that extra money, we make bets on certain companies, and we turn those into successes.
All right, so here he's making the argument for companies like Facebook buying up Instagram and Snapchat and stuff like that. And, I'm fine with that, but that's like a philosophical question that he's asking her. I don't know how she's supposed to answer it. Like, I'm sure she'd be fine to answer it, like, privately, and even as the FTC, she might have something to say, but it's just a lame question. I'm sorry. Okay.
You have to make the decision then of whether or not they are cornering the market. They used to call it cornering the market. But couldn't you say, like, Apple, Microsoft, they are kind of working together to corner markets, no? You have to make the decision.
So, again, no preparation. Apple and Microsoft are working together to corner the market. Like, I don't get it. Like, maybe Apple and Google might be cornering the market because they both have huge cell phone presences. Like, Apple to me is more, and the Chromebook. I don't really see it being, but again, he doesn't explain. So he's just, doing this stuff out of his head. And so how can she really answer? Again, every question he has an opportunity to talk about a very specific problem and ask her a question about it. Like you can talk about a very specific problem, which I'll get to that later.
Be like if a hotel says, oh, you can get us on Expedia, or you can get us on Kayak, or you can get us on, but all those companies are using the same algorithm, would that mean that it flattens those prices and you are not getting the competitive advantage that you might get from those 10 to 15 apps that are searching for the cheapest hotel rooms? Is that the idea?
That's right.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, and he's right. I mean, it's not really so flatten the prices, but they're basically marking up to the most profitable price by using the same algorithms. But I don't know. I just don't see that as being a big problem. Again, he'd need to explain it more for me.
Paying more. I mean, you could look at a company like Walmart, where you would say, okay, they came into areas and they dominated all the competition. They didn't buy up the mom and pop shops, but because they had access to cheap labor and overseas goods and those types of things, they could undersell them and put them all out of business. And even at that moment, they might not raise their prices, but boy, could they. And boy, could they exert their influence on supply chains, and boy, could they depress wages and make sure that people, even if they're working long hours, still have to have social assistance. Is that?
Once again, it's like, what's he been doing since 2015? Like, I don't think he's reading anymore. Like, that's not how I would characterize Walmart, as they use an advantage of cheap labor and overseas supply. No, I would say that what they used is Wall Street capital and cheap products from China, and built these superstores and just hired people for whatever the market rate was, really, and then just drove out all the rest of the stores in the competition. And so in a sense, like, if you looked at all these Chinese companies as one company, China Inc., moved in, right? So Americans said, oh, hey, China Inc., you're you've got the lowest prices on everything. We'll sell them in our stores. We'll distribute your products. And a lot of people in America made tons of money, and still do, distributing Chinese products. It's a big issue. It's a big question whether it was right that it happened, what should be done about it now. So I just feel like, again, he's saying, oh, Walmart's evil because they took cheap labor in China and they drove out the mom and pops. That theory, just none of his, like, economic frameworks makes sense to me. Again, yeah, you say, hey, Max, you're an idiot. They make sense to find, whatever. Okay.
Are the ones that have to separate the eggs. It's curious to me that the government wouldn't have other methods of working with these corporations to ask them to curb their excesses in exchange for what they get, which is the stability of the American system.
So look,
Well, yeah. So, hey, John, why don't we just start with you, right? So he's saying, hey, these companies, they're taking advantage of people and they're hurting stability, but I don't see it. Like, how are they hurting stability? Like Facebook or Apple or Microsoft, they don't have a political position. They're not the ones getting people all riled up and upset and just feeling disenfranchised and screwed. It's people like Jon Stewart, right? Or Republicans. So Republicans are saying, all these people, the deep state is screwing you and these big companies are screwing you. And then Jon Stewart's saying, oh, no, it's you Republicans that are screwing everybody, right? I mean, so it's just a big food fight, just a big name calling. And yes, so there is a huge problem with stability in this country. It feels like we're going to go into some sort of civil war. And I feel like Jon Stewart is one of the biggest instigators of that. It's not the companies, it's him. Like, you stop saying everybody's evil on your show. You stop attacking MAGA people and Trump and all the rest of it. Again, I don't like Trump. I'm not into MAGA. I understand that. But he's attacking them. These companies aren't actually attacking people. And in fact, the bigger problem is they're now suppressing it. But, that's a whole long video, my opinion on that, so I'm not going to go into that. We'll just keep moving on.
Is industry more consolidated today? I mean, my gut would tell me it is more consolidated. You have larger companies that swallow up in the pursuit of growth, swallow up and consolidate. It feels that way to me. Do you have the metrics that suggest that that's actually the case?
So here he goes again onto the metrics. And again, it's a good question. Like, how do we define what a monopoly is? How do we define too big to fail or what a company is? And, I mean, the SEC did do a bunch of work with this by saying, the bank regulators is like, okay, this is too big to fail. This is how much capital you have to have. So, Wall Street, actually, these questions are addressed. And, but, his question here, again, is just so broad. It just doesn't, I don't see what she's going to answer. I mean, it's just not specific enough. Okay, where are we? Okay.
They're saying this new algorithm, this new kind of machine learning model called AI, that's going to transform every aspect of American life and the American economies. It's already being consolidated. Apple has bought 30 AI models. Microsoft has probably bought. Google has bought. They all buy AI startups and put them behind their paywall, and they're already having an arms race to see who will be either the monopoly or this will be an oligopoly. I got to tell you, I wanted to have you on a podcast, and Apple.
Okay, I'm going to stop here. That's a very good question about AI. Now, I don't think we're at that point yet, and there are tons of small companies in the AI space, and this isn't something that the big companies can really totally monopolize. In fact, I think there's no way they can do it. Now, they have very strong distribution arms, yes. So, but we have sort of like three, we have multiple companies. We have Google, we have Microsoft, we have Facebook, we have Apple. So I feel, even the big companies, even if you take the media companies, we have a lot of companies that will compete. And actually, as long as you even have two, you're doing much better. So I don't see a monopoly in this. And so I think it's a super question. But let's just say it's a good question, right? Okay, it's a good question. What are we going to do about AI, right? To me, he owes me to let her answer that question. He's raised a question about AI. That's fine. Like, he's supposed to be working for me. Like, I'm watching a show. I'm doing the advertising. He's supposed to be working for me. But this is what happens. Like, he asks a question, but then he continues.
Asked us not to do it, to have you. They literally said, please don't talk to her. Having nothing to do with what you do for a living. I think they just... I didn't think they cared for you, is what happened. They wouldn't let us do even that dumb thing we just did in the first act on AI. Like, what is that sensitivity? Why are they so afraid to even have these conversations out in the public sphere?
So I don't believe it. I do not believe Apple would say, don't do a segment on AI. He'd have to explain that. Yeah, no way. I mean, why would... I mean, Apple doesn't have any AI at the moment, really. I mean, I guess Siri was like, but that's old AI. So I don't know what he's saying here. And did they say not to interview her because of that? Again, he brings up a question about AI. I think it's too broad of a question and not a good question, but okay, he brings up the question. He doesn't give her a chance to answer it. Then he goes into this thing about how they supposedly prevented him from bringing up this very important subject on his podcast, but he doesn't explain the specifics of it, and I don't believe it because AI is not Apple's core focus. As far as I know, I think they make their money selling cell phones and apps through their stuff through their, Apple TV and some laptops. I mean, that's how they make their money. They're not like, AI is not what I think about when I think Apple, right? So I just don't get it. And again, that's part of the reasons why that question got me so upset.
Has that been updated since 1890? What would you posit, what would you put forth to control this new AI technology that is looming. And I'm not talking about censorship. I'm not talking about government deciding you can't say that or you can't print that. I'm talking about in terms of business practices, these few companies controlling the entire mechanism.
Well, now, he's obviously not used this AI very much. The problem, in my opinion, with the AI is that it doesn't let you use it in the way that you want to use it. So, for instance, yesterday I was working on this like joke thing, and I went on to Claude AI, which is the latest, greatest, supposedly AI. Again, there are a bunch of these competing systems. And I typed in, what are some derogatory words for old people? And it was like, I'm not going to be involved in, in shaming people or saying bad things about people and blah, blah, this, blah, blah, that. I'm not going to give you this list. I said, I'm just asking you to look up some words in the dictionary. Well, I'm not going to look up words in the dictionary. So AI right now is actually, because they're so afraid of people saying, oh, AI is basically just spreading hate. Now, so the AI systems will censor what they say. But is it up to the AI to censor what they're saying? Hate should come from a person. But now what these AI companies and what people are saying is, oh, no, it's got to come from the technology. I don't buy that. That's a very big question. Questions he could have asked her, but he did not. And so his thing about AI, no, anybody using it that is not the issue with AI at the moment. AI is not pushing some political agenda. If anything, it is preventing from people from using it to make arguments about politics, arguments about government, arguments about governance policy, geopolitics, whatever, healthcare, drugs. You ask it to do these things and it won't do them. So, yeah, like he's so totally off the mark here.
And so...
And hoovering up data and creating algorithms that are clearly harmful, not just to children, but to political discourse. And it's pretty wild how they're able.
Again, that's completely wrong. Yes, it's hoovering up a bunch of data, but he doesn't understand what it's doing. It's not doing anything it's not pushing political discourse. Like I said, if anything, they've basically taken anything out that would appear to be political discourse, not even addressing the fact that's censorship. These AI systems, I guess that's what I'm saying, they're heavily censored. And he hasn't used them for 2 seconds. And he's saying that they're harming children? Is he nuts? And so the thing where they did, black people in Nazi uniforms like that, how's that harming anyone? It's just silly art. Like, people have been doing art like that for a long time. Now, if an artist does it and you want to complain about that artist, if you want to say, oh, well, this artist is hanging this stuff in this museum with public money and I don't want to pay my public money to see a black man as a Nazi because I feel it ruins the historical context or whatever. Those are all legitimate arguments to make. But to make it against a tool, and this has gone back in art forever, right? Philosophers have dealt with this. You cannot blame the tool on the political, whatever political thing you want to make, right? Sort of like the guns don't kill people, people do type thing, right? It's just an instrument. It's just a tool. But the reason that they're doing the censorship, in my opinion, of this AI, the reason it is censored is because he's right. They want to make it into a big business, and they don't want they don't want regulatory stuff, like Congress stuff, like passing some things that get in the way. So okay, we're just gonna get rid of anything that might be bad so we can keep building this and make some money with it. But again, my opinion is that's wrong. That's not right. No. You solve that first problem first. Whatever the tool does, it does, and it's up to the personal responsibility of the person to do it. And so I could go on and on about this. Okay, so that was the last one. Like I said, I have a cold. Where are we at now in time? 28 minutes. Oh my God. Anyway, well, if you watch this, at least you know where I'm coming from on why I didn't like this video at all. His sandbagging Lina Khan and the quote slander against Apple. Yeah, that was minor stuff. What I've just said to you, this is stuff that went through my head that really annoyed me about this interview. And again, I'm calling him out. He could do a lot better. I don't hate Jon Stewart. I want Jon Stewart to do what he used to do. I want him to get his game on, stop being a lazy whatever read some books, get it, use the technology, talk to experts, and get with it. And not just throw out these lame questions for whatever $1 million an episode he's making or whatever it is. All right. Till later.